On the 4th of April 2013, an alarm sounded in the house of Game Warden Sergeant Terry Hughes in the US state of Maine. It was past midnight, but Sergeant Hughes leapt out of bed, dressed, and ran to his car. The alarm was linked to a motion sensor installed in the kitchens of a summer camp a short drive away. The fact that it had finally triggered could mean only one thing. There was an intruder there, perhaps the very intruder that Sergeant Hughes had made it his mission to catch. The man who had been lurking in the woods, silent and unseen, subsisting off stolen food and supplies for the last 27 years. As Sergeant Hughes sped towards the camp, he felt sure that he was finally about to capture the man known as the North Pond Hermit. On the 7th of December 1965, Christopher Thomas Knight was born. He was raised in a family that was neither very poor nor very wealthy, but who got by in reasonable comfort with a degree of hard work. With 4 older brothers and 1 younger sister, he was never short of company, although his family in general were predisposed to solitude. His parents had few friends and rarely exchanged more than a few friendly but disinterested words with their neighbours. At school, Christopher struggled to fit in with other children. He enjoyed reading and would generally spend his evenings at home doing just this. He and his siblings all enjoyed poetry and would read Shakespeare together. Dealing with people outside of his immediate family, however, appeared to make Christopher anxious and stressed. Like his parents and his brothers and sister, he preferred his own company. Though quiet, Christopher was extremely smart. He did well in his studies, spoke eloquently on the rare occasions that he did speak in public, and was generally very capable with whatever projects he took on. After graduating early from high school, he took an electronics course at a local technical college and got a job as an alarm technician. He would install and service intruder alarms across a wide area, a job that he was extremely proficient at and which he seemed to take some pride in. In 1986, however, he abruptly left this job. In fact, he left his life altogether. He got in his car and drove back to his childhood hometown of Albion, Maine. When he got there, however, he didn't stop. Instead, he kept driving, seemingly aimlessly, until he'd travelled almost 100 miles and his vehicle was running low on gas. At this point, he pulled into a car park at the head of a trail near the Belgrade Lakes in Maine, left his car keys on the dashboard, and with almost nothing except the clothes on his back, walked into the woods. He wouldn't emerge for 27 years. The Belgrade Lakes are a set of linked lakes near the town of Belgrade in Maine. They're a popular recreational area used for swimming, boating, fishing, and camping in summer. There are hundreds of summer residences, resorts, campsites, and recreation facilities in the area, although most of these are only used during the warmer months of the year. The bitterly cold temperatures experienced in Maine during the winter leave the area largely deserted during this time. In addition to this, while the area is popular with hikers, most who visit generally stick to established trails. The woods in the area can be exceptionally thick and thorny, making them difficult and unpleasant to navigate for anyone who deviates from an established route. It was into one particular area of dense woodland, known locally as the Jersey, that Christopher ventured. He initially moved his camp every so often to avoid detection, but after his first year, he settled on a particular site that suited him well. It was close to the shore of North Pond and consisted of a sheltered area between several large boulders. It was surrounded by dense forest, and he would access it by picking his way in through the forest, stepping only on rocks and tree roots so as to leave no footprints. Christopher had no camping experience and had almost no supplies with him when he first entered the woods, and so what he needed to survive, he obtained by stealing. He would move around in the very early morning hours and went to great lengths to avoid confrontation. He would stake out a holiday home for days at a time until he was sure that it was empty, then pick the lock, use his knowledge of alarm systems to disable any electronic security, and then steal sparingly from what he found inside. He would take food, clothes, and fuel. To avoid detection, he never started a campfire, but instead melted snow and kept warm by means of a small propane stove. He used hundreds of stolen copies of National Geographic magazine to create a sturdy floor for his camp, and stole a mattress, rope, and tarpaulins to build himself a shelter. He also took books, hundreds of them. When not working on his remote encampment, he would hike, enjoy the beauty that surrounded him, and read. In later years, he stole a small portable radio and batteries to power it, and would tune in to listen to news, music, and radio episodes of his favorite sitcom, Everybody Loves Raymond. Christopher faced his greatest challenges in the winter months, when snow would blanket the forest and temperatures would drop as low as -18 degrees Celsius, or 0 degrees Fahrenheit. In these conditions, it was often too cold to sleep at night, and so he would remain awake, pacing back and forth to maintain his circulation. This existence might seem extreme, but Christopher weathered it well. By his own account, he never got sick, something he attributed to never being exposed to other people. He avoided injury too, despite once slipping and falling on ice. As he aged, his eyesight deteriorated, as did the condition of his teeth. His preference for calorie-dense, sugary foods left him with numerous dental problems, but he tolerated the pain of his rotting teeth as stoically as he tolerated the cold. Stealthy as he was, Christopher's existence didn't go unnoticed. Over the years he resided in the woods, he committed nearly 1,000 burglaries. Often he took only small items, such that the owners weren't sure they had been burgled at all. In other cases, his pilfering was very noticeable indeed, as he struck the same cabins or holiday cottages multiple times. The cost of the things he took was usually minimal, but the knowledge that someone had entered their property and stolen from them caused considerable distress to those with homes around the lake. Christopher, though his name was unknown, became something of a legend. The North Pond Hermit was suspected to exist, though almost nobody had actually seen him. Some residents were so sure of his existence that they took to leaving food outside their properties during the winter months to prevent Christopher from breaking in. During almost 3 decades spent in the woods, Christopher did have a few close encounters. One day, he passed a hiker on a trail, and the two greeted one another. The brief hello was the only contact that Christopher had with another human being that decade. On another occasion, he mistakenly broke into a house while one of the residents was still there, and asleep. The resident awoke to the sound of Christopher moving around in the next room, and shouted at the intruder to get out. Christopher promptly did so, and never returned to that particular property. On a third occasion, his camp was discovered by a couple of fishermen, who sympathized with Christopher's desire to be left alone, and came to an agreement with him that they would tell nobody of his existence. It wasn't until 2013, however, that Christopher's long stint in the woods finally came to an end. Sergeant Terry Hughes, a game warden, had by this time received so many reports of petty thefts from around North Pond that he resolved to catch the culprit. To do so, he would work with Pine Tree Summer Camp, a summer camp that served children and adults with disabilities. Christopher had stolen from the camp so often before that the camp owner said that the hermit was treating it like his own personal Walmart. It was almost a certainty that, at some point, Christopher would return. Sergeant Hughes worked with the camp to install hidden motion sensors in the kitchen area. These would trigger an alarm in his own house a short drive away. On the 4th of April 2013, the alarm was triggered. Sergeant Hughes rushed to the camp and there saw a surprisingly clean-shaven and ordinary-looking man with a backpack moving around the kitchen. The man wore an odd assortment of clothing and a pair of original 1980s aviator-style eyeglasses. It was Christopher, his pack and pockets filled with around $200 worth of stolen food. Christopher offered no resistance when he was arrested. At first, he was unable to answer the many questions the police had for him. He was unused to speaking with other humans, had never known the real names of the places he frequented, and had long since lost track of time. When asked how long he had been in the woods, he could only recall that he entered not long after the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster in 1986. From this, police could deduce that he had hidden out in the woods for 27 years, from the age of 20 to the age of 47. Eventually, after much questioning, Christopher led police back through the thick undergrowth of the Jersey to his camp. They were astonished to find that it was not particularly remote at all. It lay on private land, not far from maintained walking trails and paved roads. It was shockingly close to dozens of summer homes on the shores of North Pond. And yet, despite his proximity to civilization, he had remained undiscovered there for years, so long that the washing lines he'd strung up in his camp had been absorbed by the trees they were tied around, so long that the little money he'd taken for emergencies during his many burglaries had started to mold and decay, so long that he had been all but forgotten by society. His family were intensely private and had chosen not to file a missing person report, believing that Christopher had gone off of his own choice, and that this choice should be respected. Now, however, Christopher would have to answer for the many thefts he had committed during his time in the woods. He spent more than half a year in jail awaiting trial, and then was sentenced to 7 months imprisonment, a sentence which he had almost entirely served by the time it was handed down. In addition to this, he was put on probation, given mandatory mental health support, ordered to avoid alcohol, and ordered to either get a job or attend school within a certain time frame or face further punishment. Local police constructed a small road out to Christopher's camp and retrieved anything of value. Residents who had suffered thefts were invited to come and take back their stolen goods, but the majority of the items were never claimed. Christopher got a job in a car repair shop. He avoided any further legal trouble, but at the same time did not entirely reintegrate. He reportedly has little desire to make friends or have any contact with other people, and never appears to be particularly at home in society. Despite speaking to one journalist, he offered no explanation for why he left. Given his age, the strict conditions of his probation, and advances in CCTV and home security, it is unlikely that the man once known as the North Pond Hermit will ever be able to return to his old life in the woods. He will remain, truly, a one-of-a-kind legend within the area that he haunted for 27 years.